Hello, welcome. In this video we explain how did the world reaction on American Civil War. Europe watched the US Civil War with a fascinated interest. France, Britain, Prussia, Austria, Russia and Spain sent their media and diplomats to the war zones to document what was going on. To put into context the general geopolitical realities of 1861 Europe was undergoing a dramatic political shift with the rise of liberalism since the 1848 revolutions. The United States was seen as a tremendous liberal experiment, gone awry, and many monarchists in Europe saw the Civil War as evidence that liberalism was a failed project. 1. France and Spain used the pretext of the US Civil War to send its military into Mexico. The objective was to re-establish an imperial presence in the Americas. When the war broke out, French and Spanish militaries landed in Veracruz, Mexico and quickly took control of Mexico City. The thinking was that if the US Union collapsed, the Bourbon dynasty of France and Spain could fill the void in the Gulf of Mexico, and position itself to reclaim the lost colonies of California. 2. Britain watched very closely from its Canadian colony. There was a real fear within Canada that the vast growth of the US economy would eventually overwhelm and overpower the Canadian provinces. Britain's Parliament was debating sending weapons and funds to the Confederates in an effort to weaken Washington to avoid the US becoming the de facto dominant North American hegemony. President Lincoln of the United States sent many diplomats to Britain pleading with them to not get involved. Much to the dismay of the Confederates, Lincoln's diplomatic efforts succeeded. 3. Prussia took the US Civil War most seriously. One thing to note was that the northern states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin and Minnesota were home to a massive German emigrant population. Otto von Bismarck, who became the Chancellor of Prussia in 1862, was fascinated with the United States. He wrote extensively on his opinions. He believed the European bankers exploited the US regional divisions to divide the US Union so that they could control transnational trade. He believed President Lincoln was a fighter for Christendom, brought by Providence to resist the transnational banking industry. This German animus toward bankers eventually took an anti-Semitic undertone into the 20th century. He watched in amazement as the industrial North used railroads, mass weapons production and conscription to absolutely overwhelm the Confederate forces. The War of Industrialization was fully embodied by Bismarck, which led to his blood and iron speech, to which he said he would unify the German nations through sheer industrial militarization. Bismarck also warned that the most important aspect of the 20th century would be the fact that the North Americans speak English. 4. The Russians, who were in the midst of the Great Game, or a 19th century version of the Cold War with Britain, ultimately watched the US Civil War and supported keeping the Union together to prevent the British from dividing and reconquering North America. Just 2 years after the Civil War had ended, the Russians sold Alaska to the US, in hopes that the US would surround and encapsulate the British colony of Canada. 5. And finally, the Spanish still held ambitions to reclaim their Latin American colonies. Seeing the spread of US influence out west absolutely frightened the Spanish, and they, like the British, were in awe of just how quickly the Americans took control of North America. They had hoped the US Civil War would break up the Union, so that the West wouldn't fully come under American control. In the end, the US Civil War proved to be Western Europe's worst nightmare, and Prussia and Russia's dream. It weakened the Western European imperial ambitions over the Western Hemisphere. and provided the Eastern and Central Europeans the ability to catch up and match the strength of the West. Unfortunately for Russia and Prussia, their backing of the US Union would only be a short-term win. For it was the United States that ultimately broke up their long-term ambitions of replacing the French and British as the European hegemonic powers. I hope you enjoy our video. If you enjoy our video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share.